Good afternoon. I'm so glad you joined me this afternoon, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, partly because I'm historically a very hard person on myself, and as a result sometimes that makes life harder, not necessarily easier. It doesn't necessarily motivate me when I've been hard on myself, even though I think that's what it will do. And it has sometimes led me to feel very isolated from others, thinking that they're more perfect than I am. And as a result, I feel badly about myself. Anybody relate to anything I'm saying at this point, with yourselves? Because I think it's a pretty common experience. So let me just do a little introduction of myself. I'm Dr. Rochelle Hoekstra-Anderson. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I have my own business called Crossroads Renewal, and I'm located in the lower level of the Chamber of Commerce building. And my life's work right now is about coaching people to lives they love. And if I could just make it that simple, that's what it is. In essence, what that means is helping people to tune into the kinds of lives they would love to have, whether it's in their health and wellness, or in love and relationships, or in their workaday lives, or the work they need to be doing or want to be doing in this world, and having time and money freedom to enjoy all of it. That is my work right now. What that means is I use a system called Dream Builder, which I am a certified Dream Builder coach as well as a certified retirement coach, and I also do health and wellness coaching. So it's basically all the areas that I have a huge passion for, and there's also one of the topics that I encounter with people day in, day out is the struggle they have with self-criticism. And it's the thing that holds people back more times than not from living lives they would really love. Would you mind giving me my pink cup? I left it up there with the green, not hers, sorry, the fuchsia one. Oh, yours is fuchsia too. Thank you. Yeah. So a couple of opportunities that are coming up. If you picked up the handouts, I just want to mention them to you right away. I have a few things that are coming up this week, and I'll talk about those in just a little bit, as well as another opportunity if you would like to take advantage of an opportunity to also work with me, and I'll talk about that at the end. So today what we're going to talk about is when life is hard, can you be kind to yourself in those moments? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at how are you currently talking to yourself, especially when you find yourselves in a challenging situation. What effect that self-talk has on how you're feeling and your general well-being. Ways to practice greater self-compassion and learn some really simple tools that I think you can apply in your day-to-day life. They're things I use. I use them actually on the way here, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, why I had to use it on the way here. But the thing is that this isn't just fluff kinds of things. This is something that has been supported by research over the last decade or more of taking a look at the benefits of self-compassion on our physical and mental well-being. And what they are showing is that self-compassion leads to decreasing stress. It helps build our resilience. So when we are faced with hard challenges, if we have self-compassion, we tend to weather those storms better. And also it improves our happiness, which I think just about everyone I know would like to be happy. We don't always know how to get to that place, but self-compassion is part of that path to feeling greater happiness. And believe it or not, when we're happier, we have better relationships with other people. So when you bring self-compassion, obviously that's going to extend in the compassion you share it with others. So that's the big picture. So the first question I have for you that I want you to consider for yourselves, would you say you are your own best friend or your own worst enemy? Anybody want to share? Okay, so can you shed some light on when it's easier to be kind to your own best friend than other times?
Just walking here or driving in the weather today, I guess you could kind of take it with a grain of salt. You could start complaining, or you could drive 200 feet behind somebody, or try to stay away from other people.
Right.
Your lights on.
Okay, so you're showing self-compassion. You're giving yourself that space to slow down, give some distance. Extra time. Okay, awesome. So being a good friend to yourself there. Anyone talk about a time where you found it harder to be that friend? Or am I the only one? When do we tend to pull out that self-critic?
When things go wrong.
When things don't go the way we want them to, right? And even just using that word wrong, I mean, there's that judgment that we put on ourselves when things don't go the way we had hoped, and we'll say, oh, that went wrong. And so sometimes just the littlest words we use that can trigger feeling down, feeling disappointed, feeling frustrated, or just feeling downright mad at yourself. And so I'm going to ask you in the next moment or two, and this may not be like right immediately apparent, or maybe it happened this morning, but I'd like you to think about a challenge you've had recently. Now, you're not going to need to share any personal information. I'm not going to ask anyone to talk about anything specific, but what I want you to do is think about a time, maybe in the recent month or last few weeks, if anything comes to mind, or even sometime in the past, even if it's more distant, that you made a mistake. Or a time when you said or you did something that was super embarrassing. A time when maybe you were working on a project and it didn't work out quite the way you had hoped it would. A time when you hurt somebody you really cared about, either intentionally or unintentionally. So what I'm going to do is give you a moment or two. If you would just jot down, you don't have to write a big, scenario, but just jot down a recent thing or something that came to mind when I asked you those different possibilities of experience that you may have had recently. Last time you made a mistake, a time you did or said something embarrassing, and yes, there's a place on your handout, time when something didn't work out or you hurt somebody. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just maybe label the situation, messed up on something at work, specific. And then what I want you to write down next to that is, what thoughts do you remember going through your mind? Or if you don't remember the thoughts at the time, what thoughts do you have now about it? Thoughts about yourself. Okay, if other thoughts come to mind while we continue, feel free to continue to write some things down. So I'm going to ask you to think about, as you look at the words you wrote down or the words you remember saying to yourself. Are they in this room?
I think we have Marshfield now.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome. Can they hear? Can you hear? So would you like to turn the volume off on them?
Hi, we had a connection for like 2 seconds and then it disconnected. The show says there's I think on our end. It said, well,
Okay, we'll keep going then. So hopefully they'll be able to hear us. But so what I want you to think about is, if you don't remember specific words, what words do you tend to use to describe yourself when things don't go the way you want them to? What labels do you tend to put on yourself? Do you find that you're kind? So when you look at what you wrote, is that what you would say to somebody else? Were you critical? Were you understanding, or were you punitive? Were you forgiving, or were you angry? Or are you angry about something that happened? So really what I'm trying to get you to start to identify is, how do you speak to yourself, especially when things aren't going the way you would like them to go. And the words that we speak to ourselves can either make things better for us, or they can absolutely make things a lot harder. We can either grow through our challenges and become better people, or we can become more self-doubtful, we can become more cynical, we can become more negative, because those words that we carry around about ourselves influence how we do our lives, and it impacts how we do our lives, how we do our jobs, how we communicate with the people we love, about the plans that we make for the future even, or the beliefs that we have about the future. All of those things come back to, what do you believe about yourself? And what holds you back? Are you a self-critical person? Do you have limiting beliefs that hold you back from having compassion sometimes when things don't go the way we want them to go? Now I'm going to have you flip. I'm going to have you think about a close friend or a relative, maybe it's a child, somebody you know that recently shared a challenge with you that they were experiencing. Maybe they were describing to you they were disappointed, or they were hurt by someone else's actions. Something didn't work out for them. And what the question I would ask you then, to follow that situation, how did you feel about them in that situation? How did you talk to them? What words did you use to talk to that person who was hurting? Were you kind and gentle and compassionate, or did it come out as spiteful, accusing, or shaming? So think about that. How do you tend to present yourself to somebody else who's hurting? Do you notice a difference? Is it easier to be that way with someone else than it is with yourself sometimes? And what we're finding is that for 80% of people, they will say yes. It is easier to be kind and compassionate with somebody else than with themselves. It's easier to be loving and kind toward people who are dealing with some kind of emotional pain than when we ourselves are experiencing it. So why? Why is the question? Why is it easier for us to be kind to others than to be kind to ourselves? Why do we tend to be much more critical and unforgiving toward ourselves when we make mistakes or things don't turn out the way we planned or had hoped? Well, one reason I believe is that in our society we're often taught that to be hard on ourselves and ashamed of almost everything from how we look to what we do, that gets results. So be hard on yourself, because then you're going to push yourself to be better. We hear things like, put on your big girl panties and grow up, or man up, or pull yourself up by the bootstraps when things don't go well, or when you're starting to maybe in a place of feeling self-pity or self-sadness or even compassion for yourself. But those aren't the words we get. We're saying, toughen up, put your shoulders back and face it. And we believe then that it's more effective to tough things out than to be kind and compassionate to ourselves when we're struggling. So what are some common myths then about self-compassion? Well, one, some people believe that, well, that's just being self-pitying. To be self-pitying means, though, that you're really just immersed in your own problems and you forget that other people struggle. That's not self-compassion. Self-compassion is seeing things exactly as they are, no more and no less. It means that you're acknowledging that you're suffering, while acknowledging that other people struggle and suffer sometimes too, that you're not unique necessarily in your struggle. So self-compassion puts problems in perspective. Self-pitying is just turning inward and feeling sorry for yourself, but there's no power in that. There's no healing in that. It's just licking the wounds. Another myth that we may believe about self-criticism is it's the best way to be successful. We may believe that when I'm self-critical, well, it keeps me motivated. And without it, I might just get too lazy. I might be too easy on myself. But the fact is, there's actually nothing motivating about criticizing yourself. And think about this. I mean, if you have a boss or supervisor who's super hard on you and constantly pointing out your flaws or how you're coming up short, how are you going to feel after a while? What's that going to do to your motivation? Or maybe you think about parenting. I think we've come a long way in our understanding of what's the best way to parent children, and it's with compassion and kindness, not without firmness though, but certainly we have discipline. But to be constantly pointing out the flaws and the mistakes and how they're not meeting your expectations, that isn't motivating to a child any more than it's motivating to us. And I find that sometimes what happens is the voice in our head that's criticizing ourselves may be a voice from the past. Might be a parent, might be a spouse, it might be a teacher. You know, maybe it's just a conglomeration of a bunch of things, or it's just the self-voice that self-critic has formed as a culmination of many different negative experiences we may have had up until now. But it's now your voice, because you're the one speaking those words to yourself. So research has found that self-criticism sabotages us, and the negative effects of self-criticism is lower self-esteem, anxiety, and depression. Okay. And for those of us who struggle with being more perfect, that whole perfectionism thing, and so if things don't go exactly, we're very, very hard, and it keeps us in a state of anxiety because we feel like we're never measuring up. No matter what I do, it's never quite enough. So you keep yourself in that failure mindset. What ends up happening is it decreases your confidence, and it also decreases the energy available to actually create the results you would love to create with your life. So self-compassion really acts more like a nurturing parent. So even when things don't go well, rather than being really harsh on yourself for your shortcomings, you still are able to be supportive and accepting of yourself, just like a kind parent. Your support is unconditional. You realize that it's perfectly okay to be imperfect. And self-compassion isn't about being complacent. Okay, so that's the concern. Well, if I'm so nice, then maybe I'll just not keep working on getting better. That isn't the effect of it at all. It's quite the opposite. Because when you believe in another person and you say, hey, it's going to get better, you can do better next time. It's all right. You're learning, you're growing. You'd say that to another person, a child or a friend, they would feel some hope and it would give them some energy. And you say the same thing yourself, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I can do this. This didn't work out. I made some mistakes, but it's okay. It can be better. So in essence, what it does is it focuses not so much on who we are in our sense of being, but our behavior. So self-compassion basically says, yeah, sometimes things you do don't work out, but that doesn't make you a bad human being. It doesn't make you worth less. And how many people walk around with a sense of worthlessness? We all have moments of it. I do. You know, if we're honest with ourselves. Because again, that expectation sometimes, and it's very powerful in our society, things are to be just perfect. And Facebook helps feed that, doesn't it? Because everybody else looks like they're having perfect lives. They look like their marriages are great, or their kids are perfect, or, you know, look at them. Their waistline is what I've always wanted, and, you know, on and on. And we focus on the things that we see in ourselves that fall short, and then we beat on ourselves. And it keeps us stuck. A third myth about self-compassion is it's being selfish. It's selfish to be self-compassionate. Studies show that women, in particular in the United States, show less compassion to themselves than men do. And we believe partly it's because it's just the role that women tend to play as caregivers and tend to sacrifice more to nurture other people. And so they forget that compassion needs to come back, circle around to themselves, because we're really not much good to anyone else if we aren't taking care of ourselves first. The old put your own oxygen mask on first. You hear in the airlines, so before you pass that oxygen mask on to someone else. It's all about self-care, and that is really, self-compassion is a form of self-care. Without it, people who are pouring into others, and again, I know some people are doing more of this than others. I mean, I have friends that are nurses, and I see them in terrible health themselves, which is just always so ironic to me, because they're in the medical profession, but they're so good at giving, taking care of, nurturing others. And then what they do is they set themselves up for burnout, caregiver burnout. And it's not just nursing, it's just one example, but it can be in any profession. It can be just a role you take in your family. And it can be either gender, so this is not to say this is only women, but it happens. And truly, it is not selfish to take care of yourselves. So let's dive in a little deeper to what exactly do I mean by self-compassion. Well, first of all, let's just talk about compassion. Compassion in general is the ability to show empathy, love, and concern to people who are in difficulty. Okay? So compassion is a little different than kindness. Kindness is just being nice to people, right? Being, helpful, courteous, respectful. Compassion goes a little deeper because that is the response that will tend to come out when we recognize somebody else is hurting or going through a challenge or a time of difficulty. And I think for most people, it's pretty natural to have some compassion for other people. I think it's a very rare person who doesn't. But we know there's a segment of the society that unfortunately have those problems that they aren't able to do that. Self-compassion then is simply the ability to take those same emotions of empathy, love, and concern and accept oneself, particularly when you're faced with a shortcoming, when you're faced with a failure, or you're faced with a rejection. Self-compassion involves treating yourself the way you would treat a friend who's having a hard time. Even if that friend blew it, they caused their own problem. We know people like that. It's like, hello, that was a dumb thing to do. But we aren't necessarily going to say that to them, I hope, unless sometimes they need that little swift kick. But we would do it in love. We would do it from a heart of trying to help that person, not just to kick somebody when you're down, and it's a pretty sad person that does that to someone else when they're hurting. But guess what? We're more likely doing that to ourselves when we're hurting, kicking ourselves when we're down. So self-compassion is a practice in which we learn to be a good friend to ourselves when we need it the most. Become an inner ally rather than an inner enemy. And I can tell you in my day in, day out conversations with the people that I help coach and help them get to the lives that they would love, this is a big focus, is how people speak to themselves and how it keeps them stuck. And getting over that hump, over to the other side to say, look, would you talk to your daughter that way? No, I would never say that to my daughter. So then what is leading you to talk that way to yourself? Well, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve that because I blew it. So there's that disconnect that we can give grace sometimes to others and we're challenged a little bit more to do that for ourselves. Research has consistently shown that there is a positive correlation between self-compassion and just your general psychological well-being. Because what they have found that people have greater social connections when they have self-compassion. They're more emotionally intelligent. They report they're happier and have greater overall life satisfaction. So we're happier, healthier human beings when we treat ourselves well. That doesn't make us selfish. It doesn't make us rude. In fact, what it does is it makes us more relatable to other people, because if you can accept yourself with your mistakes, your warts and all, other people sense that it's safe to be around you, because that forgiveness attitude comes across in how you relate to them. The other neat thing that I love about self-compassion, again coming as a psychologist because I'm dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression, people struggling with shame and fear of failure, that when I can teach them these basic things, and it's not complicated, this is not a hard concept, but it's just one that requires some focus and attention, that they begin to shift the patterns around, and life starts to feel like the pressures are easing up. And it's all in here. It's all in between the ears. So there are 3 primary elements to self-compassion I want to teach you today. And you may already be familiar with these. I don't know what your background is with some of this, but they're very basic. And if you can keep them in your mind on a day-to-day basis, it will really help you. First one is self-kindness. Just basically being kind and gentle and understanding with yourself, especially when you're suffering, when things aren't going right. You're late to work, or you drop something, or and those are the things where I hear people say, "Oh, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that again." Oh, what's the matter with me? Why didn't I better plan for this? Do these things sound at all familiar statements? I know I said it on the way here, and I'll tell you why in just a little bit. But I want to tell you about a woman named Sue who was doing this self-compassion work. And she had been at an office party. And she was just chatting with a coworker and just kind of being herself. And she ended up blurting out something that was pretty inappropriate. And of course, she was terribly embarrassed, and it happened. And after the fact, she's processing. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. That was blah blah blah. And she's been working on the self-compassion. She became aware of what her knee-jerk reaction was, and she stopped herself. And she said, instead of doing the usual thing of calling myself those typical awful names, I tried to be kind and understanding, and I told myself, oh well, not the end of the world. I meant well. It just didn't come out in the best way. Now, can imagine talking that way versus what her usual pattern was. You stupid idiot. You're probably going to lose your job now because you said something, and she's going to go tell someone, and that would have gotten so inflamed, and it would have created so much stress and anxiety, and even to the point where she would have shut down and gotten more depressed and just given up. I'm not even going to go to work because I can't. That's the pattern she was on, okay? Now she had been learning about self-compassion. She started to change the corner, turn the corner on that. And it comes to the second point, which is called common humanity. This is another component to self-compassion. And it's really recognizing that everybody is a work in progress, are we not? I know I am. We all fail. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has failed at something. And everybody has hardships. In fact, I heard it recently, someone said, we're either going into a valley, in the middle of a valley, or coming out of one. Okay, well, that's kind of a negative slant, but the truth is we all suffer, right? And we're not going to get through this life without some of it, unfortunately, but it is what it is, and it's also opportunity for us to grow and learn. And I don't know about you, but when I think back on how some of the most precious lessons of life came through seasons of suffering. Seasons where things didn't go the way I'd want. Times I made mistakes, things that if I could have gone back and rewrite history, I would have. But I also learned things through them. And common humanity is recognizing we're all on that journey together. None of us have a script to follow of how to do life perfectly. None of us do. The third component of self-compassion is mindfulness. Observing life as it is without being judgmental or suppressing your thoughts or feelings. Mindfulness is essential to self-compassion because it allows us to turn toward and acknowledge our suffering. So in essence, when you're feeling bad about something, rather than trying to stuff that feeling or pretend or run from it, what we need to do with mindfulness is just embrace it. I hurt right now. This hurts. This is hard. And be with it for a little bit. To just be with the pain is acknowledging what is. And that's healthy for us, believe it or not. And when we're uncomfortable and we try to get away from it, you stay busy and talk on the phone and do something else so I don't have to think about how bad I feel, that actually tries to push it under, and then those feelings come popping up in other places. That is not self-compassion. Self-compassion says, oh, this really hurts right now. This stings. I don't like where I'm at. So staying with it. But then not going into the other part of that, which is to ruminate and obsess and go over and over, like the woman who had said the wrong thing at the party. Her old pattern was ruminating, over and over. Oh, why did I say that? And she just keep going over and over. So we have the tendency either to try to suppress and run away from bad, painful things, or we go overboard and we're constantly dwelling on it. In the middle is, it happened. This is painful. I can't redo it, but I can stick with it and I can stay with this. It's part of me being a human being, and it's okay. It's really okay. It's not the end of the world. What that does for us is it gives us perspective. Because if we're holding ourselves to impossible standards, and if we never give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, chances are we're going to show the same with other people. We won't be understanding when they mess up. Because your standards are up here, so you're going to expect everybody else to be up here. And of course, we know no one can meet your standards. Even you can't. Right? So going back to Sue, what she said was, she said, I acknowledged how bad I felt in the moment. I wished it didn't happen, but it did. I was amazed that I could actually be with the feelings of just that embarrassment and how my cheeks got all red and the heat was rising in my head, but I didn't get all lost in the self-judgment of that moment. I knew the feelings would not kill me and they would eventually just pass. And they did. And I gave myself a little pep talk and I saw my coworker the next day. I said an apology and I said, I'm sorry for what I said. And she was fine and it was all over. Okay? And so something that before she would have just expanded and blown up, now she had come to a place of, it's okay. This is part of being human. And it turned out beautifully. Now her brain wasn't shut down by the emotion, but it was relaxed so that she came up with a solution, which was go back and apologize. Fix it. It was no problem. Okay? So another way to describe these three essential elements of self-compassion is loving, being loving to yourself, being connected to the world around you to say everybody's going through some trial. If I sat down with each one of you and spent any amount of time with you, I believe that at some point we would get to something you're struggling with, if you're honest. Okay? So we're all connected in that way because we're all struggling with something. And the third component is just being in the here and now. That's what mindfulness is. It's just being in the moment, being present. Because our brains love to go to the past or go to the future. Mindfulness is about bringing your whole experience into the now and just being with the now. And as you do that, you're going to be feeling so much better about yourself. Your well-being will be much greater. So what I'd like to do is take you through some things to help increase the practice of self-compassion for yourselves. Okay? Because I want you to be more calm. I would love for you to feel more secure and more contented in your lives and in your experience. And if you're already at a 10 on that, maybe we can push you up to 11. Okay? Some of us, if we can just move ourselves from a 4 to a 5, that would be a great step. Okay? So the first strategy I want to offer you is to be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. So if you're one who's used to being critical, and you're not even aware you're being critical of yourself because, quite honestly, we don't tend to pay attention to what we're thinking about. We just pay attention to how bad we feel. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm feeling bad right now. What was I just thinking? That is a strategy to get you back to what were you thinking. So it helps to pay attention to the words you're speaking to yourselves. And I want you to think about it right now. I want you to visualize a small child who's hurting over being left out at school. Or maybe a coworker who was passed over for a promotion that she was really counting on and thought she was getting. Okay, now I'm thinking if you were coming at it from a place of compassion, you would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I know this feels awful right now. I know how much this is something you were hoping for. Let's go get some coffee. Let's talk about it. You probably put an arm around or, we put a hand out because that's a way of making a connection with someone in their pain. So you can be kind to yourself in the same way. And what I would recommend is, first of all, speak kindly to yourself, just like you would a friend. Call yourself by your name even. Rochelle, it's okay. It didn't go the way you wanted it to, but you still put yourself out there and you did the best you could. Some people call themselves what they call their, sweetheart, dear one, loved one, honey, whatever. Use a word of endearment with yourself. This is a really hard place to be in right now. In addition to using those kind, gentle, affirming words, bless you, comfort yourself with a physical gesture. And let me show you one. So I don't know. So when we are reaching out to help somebody, the typical thing is it depends on how close that relationship is. We're either going to probably touch them on the forearm, or we might put an arm on the shoulder, or if we're really good friends, we might give them a nice hug. Okay. Now, this is what you can do for yourself, and it doesn't have to be obvious to the world around you. Let's say something happened at work and you got stressed and you don't want to be going into this thing that's real obvious that you're doing self-compassion, but what you could do, put your hand over your heart. One hand, two hands. If that's too obvious to you, another thing when I reach out to people and I'm talking to them, a lot of times I'll just touch them on the hand and I'll put my hand on top of their hand. It's a very non-obvious, subtle way to just soothe yourself. And you can just, a slight stroke. Or if the pain is in your stomach, just put your hand there. And it's a way of soothing. You can even do it to your knee, So a physical gesture, and what we have found through research, that is just as important as the words you speak. In fact, even imagining a hug lights up your brain as if you were getting a real physical hug. So picture getting a hug. Give yourself a hug. Okay, so what it does is it's going to release oxytocin, which is a hormone of love and bonding, and so we want to love and bond on ourselves. Okay. The second strategy I'd like to propose is give yourself permission to be imperfect. Do you remember getting permission slips when you were in school? We get a permission to leave early or go to do this or whatever. Well, how about you give yourself a permission slip for making mistakes that you're going to give yourself some room to make a mistake. You have permission to make a mistake. You have permission to not be perfect. Because it's all about giving yourself room to be human. We all have our days where we're lazy, or we aren't careful with what we say or do, or we're just in a mood. We all have it, if we're honest, right? So what I'm recommending to you is give yourself that permission. Never lose faith in your own potential just because you mess up or things don't go as you plan. When you look in the mirror, the next time you look in the mirror, instead of seeing yourself as maybe broken or screwed up, what I want you to do is say, look at yourself and say, I see the goodness in you. You are a person who is working hard at doing the best you can. And I really value you. I really respect what you're doing. Can you imagine if we took that time every day, looked in the mirror and talked to ourselves like that? How that would impact our physiology, how that would impact how we approach the problems that come that day? Because now you've just guarded yourself. You just shored up everything so you are in a good position of inner strength and resilience to be able to deal with stresses that come your way. The third strategy is to use mindfulness. And what that means is to be in the moment and not have a judgment about it. Like Sue, whose face got red because she said something embarrassing, and rather than, oh, I just want to cringe, I want to cover myself, she said, oh, I'm just embarrassed right now. It's okay. Let the heat come to the face. I'll be okay. This will pass. That's what mindfulness is. Be in the moment of whatever it is. If you're feeling pain, just note it. Don't try to make it go away at that point. Because you try to just make it go away, what you're trying to do is repress it. Really, self-compassion is about staying with the suffering. And it won't last that long. Amazingly, when you stay with it, it passes faster. Because a lot of times you think, well, I put so much focus on it, it's going to get worse. And it's like, in reality, that's not true. Because now you're staying with what is, and it's starting to dissipate. Stay with it. You might have to stay with it for 5-10 minutes, or maybe half an hour. But after a while, I say, okay. This is going to pass. Suffering occurs when we add resistance to our pain. So when you're resisting it, that's when you start to suffer. And that's where we see things coming out in other ways. Crabbiness at other people, irritability, neck aches, back aches, headaches. It's because you're trying to get away from the pain. Embrace it so it doesn't have to come out in all these other symptoms. Just embrace it, be with it. And the fourth strategy is to memorize a set of compassionate phrases. Whenever you find yourself saying, I'm terrible, I'm horrible, I can't believe I screwed up again, whatever your phrases are, have a few phrases handy that you can say instead. I'm in a moment of suffering. This hurts right now. Breathe. Don't judge. Just breathe. It's okay. I choose to be kind to myself right now. I choose to give myself some compassion right now. And that final strategy that I would love to offer for you is called guided meditation. And is there anybody in here that uses meditation on a regular basis? I can't recommend it enough as a way And there's so many recordings that are available through the internet that you can download and listen to. In fact, I included one for you called www.selfcompassion.org, and it's called the Self-Compassion Break. And I had every intention to play it for you, but my time is going too quickly. But here was the self-critical moment before I came here today. I have a speaker, a nice little Bluetooth speaker that I always have plugged into the wall. Always is the operative word. Apparently not, because it wasn't there and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I'm tearing around the house, looking everywhere. It's gone. I don't know where it is. So I couldn't bring it. And so on the way here, I'm like, I can't believe I didn't. Normally I pack those things the night before. How come I didn't do that? And all of a sudden I caught myself. And I thought, oh my gosh, you are going to give a presentation on self-compassion and you are beating yourself up right now. This is hilarious. See how naturally it kicks in? And I had to pull myself back in the psych. So what I did at that moment was I did something called soft belly breathing. And I'm going to teach you something real quick. And it's so helpful. And you can do it at any time. But soft belly is, see, when we're tense, we tighten up these muscles and our shoulders tend to be like boards. Soft belly is like, and of course, as women in particular, like we don't want our belly sticking out because we get all like, I get stressed if my belly's sticking out. But you know what? Soft belly is relaxing. So what you do is you use the word soft and belly, and you go, so you're going to do a nice slow deep breath. And on the inhale, it's soft belly. And I do that for about 5 minutes, soft belly. Now, I had my eyes closed. I didn't in the car when I was driving, obviously. But I was sending those signals, soft belly, because that meant that if I was soft belly, I couldn't hold on to the tension. I couldn't. I tried, but I couldn't. And when I said soft belly, now I say it out loud, soft belly, because I'm telling myself, okay, forget the darn speaker, soft belly, soft belly. Thoughts kept coming up. That's okay. I let them come. Soft belly, soft belly. All of that is a demonstration of self-compassion. And so that's what I invite for you guys to really take a look at. These are very simple strategies. You can do them at your desk. You can do them in the moment. And if you need to, if you're in a heated place, go into a quiet place. Shut the door. If it's the bathroom stall, go there and remind yourself that it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to love on yourself. It's okay to soothe yourself. It's okay to just be in the moment of suffering that will pass. They always pass. And be kind to yourself. And as you do that, you are taking excellent care of yourself. And as you take excellent care of yourself, you are at your best. You are giving your best self to the world. So be kind to yourself. And that will, you know what that's going to do? Be like a magnet to everyone around you, because they will feel your peace and they will want to be around you, because you're bringing in that acceptance. So as I close today, I want to invite you to a couple of things I've got coming up this week. Tomorrow night I'll be at Mid-State Technical College. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I'll be doing the personal development workshop called Building the Best You. And it's a 2.5-hour workshop. It's at 5:30 to 8 o'clock. You can find it on the Mid-State Facebook page. Again, it's called Building the Best You, and it goes from 5:30 to 8 p.m. And it'll be a really fun but powerful workshop to help people create change in their lives when they walk out the door. They will have tools, so come to that. With my wellness focus, I also have something called a Wine and Wellness Sip and Sample this Sunday down at the Chamber. And I've got some wellness experts coming from Texas who are going to be doing a short presentation on the value of nutrition to create better brain health, to release toxins from our brains and also from our bodies. And so it's going to be an amazing thing. So there'll be some wine and cheese for fun, but there will also be some samples of some really amazing health products that I would really encourage to come bring anybody. It's open to the public. So that's that. And then the final thing that I want to offer to you is a special 50% off a consultation. I do what I call breakthrough 90-minute sessions with people who tend to be stuck in something, and we do a 90-minute power session. And what I help people do is figure out where they're stuck, and we dig into some of those things. We create a vision of the life they want, and we create the next step to get people moving toward the life they love. So if you'd love to take advantage of that, I've got a special 50% off of that. and that's listed on the back. You can go to my website and put in the Save 100 in the coupon code for that. So I thank you for your attention. I wished I would have had more time to do more of the actual demonstrating with you and doing more self-compassion. But let me ask you, how did it go? And would you please fill out the feedback for me? That would be wonderful. But any comments or questions? And what did you think of this? Anyone so bold to say?
Some good examples and different phrases and different ideas.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, well, if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes leaving the feedback forms here, I would love that. And I thank you so much and have a very self-compassionate afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.